Hi guys, my name is Victoria Paulino and I'm currently in college studying to be a classical concert pianist. So I'll be doing a couple videos that are going to be divided into categories. The first 5 are going to be a quick overview of music history and the important periods. And in the following ones, I'll be talking about introduction to a new instrument with more focus in the piano, which is my field of work. So let's go to our first phase, which is the Renaissance and the origins of music. Renaissance means rebirth. The spirit started about roughly in the 1400s and ended in the 1600s. So the start of the Renaissance was also the end of the Middle Ages. One of the big changes in the Renaissance was in the basic way people thought about things. In the Middle Ages, people thought that life was supposed to be hard. They grew up thinking that life was nothing but hard work and war. However, in the 1300s, the people in Florence, Italy, began to think differently about life. They studied the writings and the works of the Greeks and Romans and realized that earlier civilizations had lived differently. So this new way of thinking was called humanism. Now, with this, people thought that life could be enjoyable and they could have comforts. They started to think that people should be educated in things like art, music, and science could make life better for everyone. So this was a real change in the way people thought. In the Middle Ages, music was dominated by the church. So most composition was for sacred use and based on the plain chant that had been part of worship since the earliest years of Christianity. And although most music remained religious during the Renaissance, the relaxation of church's political control over society meant that composers were allowed greater freedom to be influenced by art, classical mythology, and even astronomy and mathematics. So the invention of the printing press also meant that music could be published and distributed for the very first time. So most music written during this period was meant to be sung, either as a large choral, pieces in church, or as songs or madrigals. That's it. But non-vocal music started to flourish too, as technology enabled music instruments to be more expressive and agile. So pieces could now be written specifically for instruments such as the sackbut and lute. So the most important composers were English and Italian, but we won't really get into this in this video because this is just a very basic overview that I'm gonna give you in every period of music history. So, the style of Renaissance church music is described as choral polyphony, and polyphony is a type of musical texture consisting of 2 or more simultaneous lines of independent melody. Keep that in mind, independent melody. As opposed to a musical texture with just one voice, which is called monophony, or a texture with one dominant melodic voice accompanied by chords, which is called homophony, okay? So keep these 3 terms in mind: polyphony, monophony, and homophony, okay? So another thing is the choral polyphony was intended to be sung a cappella, which means without instruments. So lots of terms for you to keep in mind, but this is gonna be useful, especially when we talk about Baroque and classical music. So make sure you really learn those terms. When we approach more the 16th century, there are lots of polychoral music, and another new term for us, polychoral, like poly means more than one, so polychoral means more than one choir. So Now we're going to talk about instrumental music, because until now we have been talking about music for voice. So until the beginning of the 16th century, instruments were considered to be less important than voices. So they were used for dances and to accompany vocal music, but here they only doubled the voices. So during the 16th century, however, composers took great interest in writing music for instruments, and a lot of these instruments were intended for outside. Some examples are the lute, the viol, the crumhorn, the raquet, the sackbut, which is later becoming the trombone. So the sackbut is like the early trombone, and the trumpet, which was valveless. So I'm gonna give you some quick overall characteristics of Renaissance music before we end this video, and they are: the music was mainly based on the Greek modes, and we can get more into that when we talk about music theory, but I'm just planting seeds of what we're going to talk about. So gradually, like later on the music, the accidentals were creeping in, and I'm going to explain what the accidentals are, so no need to worry right now. And by the way, in music we have what we call key signatures. A key signature is a collection of every accidental found in a scale. So an accidental is a note of a pitch or pitch class that is not a member of the scale or mode indicated by the most recently key signature applied on the score. It may sound complicated now that I talk about it, but don't worry, when you get into music theory, I will explain all this to you, and you'll see that is far simpler than you are thinking right now. So the second characteristic of the Renaissance music is that the texture became more rich with 4 more parts, and the bass line is added below the tenor. So in music, we have what is called 4-part writing, or SATB voicing, as you want to call it. And the name of these 4 voices are soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. That's why SATB, see? So yeah, harmony-wise, there was a greater concern with the flow and progression of chords, and we are going to learn what chords means too. So, which is something that we'll see that later in music theory. I'm not gonna get into that right now. But in church music, some pieces were intended for a cappella performance, and they were mainly contrapuntal. By that I mean lots of imitations between voices. We are going to see that a lot in the Baroque period, which is our next video. So some church music was accompanied by instruments, for example, polychoral pieces in antiphonal style. And antiphonal means questions and answers, kind of like a stereo effect. So okay, I've talked about church music. So in the secular music, like non-religious music, there was lots of vocal pieces and dances and lots of instrumental pieces. However, a lot of the instrumentals were in a vocal style, so vocal music was by far the more important in the Renaissance. So yeah, that is it for our first video. In the next one, we will be getting into some good stuff, and I'll have a couple recommendations for you guys to listen. We'll be talking about the Baroque period, a little bit of history, and some important composers. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye bye!